Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing, Magic, and Mysticism, here to talk to you more about the occult and the paranormal. Well, today I wanted to talk about, can a movie set be cursed or haunted or be subject of bad luck, however you want to term it. So specifically what I'm going to be talking about is the first Poltergeist that was released in 1982. The film was about, and there was two sequels afterwards, so there were three. The movie is about the Freeling family whose house was subject to various paranormal phenomena, which culminated in the capture of the youngest child, Carol Ann, and she was captured by a dark force, which transported her from our physical dimension into another dimension through the television set. And it's somewhere between the physical and the spiritual. I should consider like an in-between type of realm. So, I guess my question was, the video is going to be talking about whether supernatural sort of things can cause anomalous phenomena during the filming of this movie, which resulted in a lot of odd things and even possibly staff deaths. So this is just kind of something for you to consider. I'm trying not to draw any type of conclusions about this, but just kind of tell you what happened, and I'll let the audience decide whether this is something that is real or not. So the first thing to talk about would be that there was a scene, and I hope that some of you have watched this movie, so you'll know kind of what I'm talking about. There was a scene where Robbie Freeling, he was the young boy in the family. He was in his bedroom, and things started to be happening around the house. And he had a toy clown. And at one point, the clown became possessed and started to wrap its arms around Robbie and started to choke him. Well, this, according to the actor who played Robbie, actually happened. That this electronic toy, when they were trying to set it up, malfunctioned and actually started to choke him, and he had to be almost rescued by staff because it wasn't supposed to work that way. It wasn't supposed to come on at that particular time, and there was a malfunction, and things went haywire. So that was a small little thing that happened. The next thing is that James Caan, who was the novelist for the story, he was on set doing his work in a building on site, and there was a storm, and lightning struck his building where he was working. It struck the building, and it caused the air conditioning to bust apart, and a piece of front end went and flung itself towards him and hit him while he was working. You know, kind of strange type of things. There's also a scene, and this may be a clue that for those people who believe that there could be something to it being cursed. There was a scene in the movie where I believe that the Freeling family moved to another house, and it was built upon a cemetery, and they weren't supposed to. They thought that the bodies were moved, but they weren't. So at one point, when things started to go really bad, Diane fell into a swimming pool that they were about to cement to make it into a usable pool, and she slid into the dirt pool, and then all of a sudden corpses started to come up and meet her where she was. The corpses that their house were built upon, which was sacred ground, hallowed ground. Now, that actually happened. These were, apparently, they weren't replicas. They weren't created skeletons. They were the skeletons of real people that they used. I did some research, looked at a lot of different sources, and even went into Snopes to see do some fact checking, and Snopes says that is actually correct. What happened was in 1982, there wasn't a lot of replicas of skeletons. They weren't like mass produced like they are nowadays. And to make it, according to the producers, were to be too expensive. So they went and bought 13 skeletons from a medical supply company, and they used them. And those 13 skeletons were in the pool. Now, for those of y'all who are very knowledgeable about hoodoo, and especially African Caribbean, other African Caribbean types of religions, I know hoodoo is more kind of eclectic and southern. There is a lot of times a connection between the physical body and the spirit. That is why a lot of times places like cemeteries and things, when you are wanting to work with a particular spirit, you take the graveyard dirt and whatnot. The physical and the spiritual are more connected. So can you imagine that these 13 skeletons were not at rest? They weren't buried. They weren't done right as far as the customs of our culture. Can you imagine if one or two, maybe 3 out of the 13 were restless spirits maybe of murderer, a hitman, a soldier, who is just, their bones are just taken. It makes for, a little bit of a bad luck could happen. So a possibility, like I said. If you remember the second one, there is a Native American actor's name was Will Sampson. He was a shaman with his tribe. Now this is in actual life. This is the actor. He felt the need to do an exorcism on the site and the set of the Poltergeist 2, because he felt like that there were evil spirits there. He himself was one of the first deaths. He died, I think it was a year and a half or 2 years after that, of kidney failure. Before I go into the deaths, though, there was a gentleman, I think his name was Richard Lawson. He was the parapsychologist. One of the parapsychologists, one of the 2 males in the first one. He was in a plane crash. But don't want to get too far into that. Will Sampson was the first death. He was also the actor who played in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I think his name was, they referred to him as Chief. Next one. There is Dominique Dunn. She played Dana. She was the oldest child in the Freeling family. Dana Dunn, the actress. I believe that it was a few months after the release of Poltergeist in 1982 that she had a volatile relationship with her boyfriend, and a couple months after that they broke up. He came to her house and he strangled her. She didn't die. She went into a coma and then later died. I think I'm trying to remember his name. It was John Sweeney, I think that's what his name was. Well, in any case, he got convicted of voluntary manslaughter. Next, Heather O'Rourke. She was the main character. She was the whole, she was being rescued by the entire family. She lived through the first two movies, and in the third one, before it was actually released, she died. She had an unknown congenital disease. I'm trying to think of what it was. It was congenital stenosis. That's what it was. And she died at age 13, suddenly. And there were no symptoms until the end, in which they tried to bring her to the hospital, and she died shortly thereafter. So that's just a few of the things. When you encounter one or two things, doesn't really make for anything, but when you take into account a lot of these different events, deaths, weird things, it makes you wonder, at least. Now, when I said curse, I'm not saying that necessarily that somebody, and I'm not using it in the sense of somebody is mad and putting a curse on someone else or on a project. That certainly could happen, but what I'm thinking about is more about what I mentioned about the restless dead. That is a whole other type of curse in a way, if we use the word curse in a general sense, is that bad things can happen when you harm or offend spirits, forces, the dead. It just can happen. They have their own power and their own influence. You have 13 of them. So, who's to say? Also, some people have said that, well, one or two of these deaths, natural causes. One or two of them had maybe some prior medical conditions, and they just happened by coincidence to die shortly after the movie was made and released. The second part of that is that we know is that with magic and curses and various things, is that when that is wielded, that it typically will affect the most vulnerable people and the most vulnerable parts of them. So yes, if you have a medical condition, it could make it worse. If you have a volatile relationship, if you have a weakness in that area of your life, then dark energy, malevolent forces, wrathful energy can make things worse. So what do you think? I'm just throwing out some ideas. Do you think that there was some type of supernatural cause, some influence from the spirit world, from the dead, or is this all coincidence? I know that some other films, especially things, I think The Exorcist 3, I want to say, sometimes people will embellish things happening, paranormal stuff on the set to kind of sell the movie, to kind of make it scarier. Oh, there was actually some bad things happening here, some scary, horror-like things. But deaths are a whole other thing. That's too hard to fabricate. If you are interested in more about this particular topic, about the Poltergeist movie and all of the weird stuff that happened around it, I remember in my research that Shudder was have a series about this very thing, not only just Poltergeist, but I think other movies too. So you might want to look into it. I haven't seen it. I don't have Shudder. But if you are interested, that's where you can go. So in any case, please subscribe and like. I appreciate you listening to me ramble about this topic. And I hope that you all have a really good weekend. Take care.